Chief Executive of the Perth USAsia Centre, Gordon Flake. Thanks for your time. Gordon, tell us, what's your read on the impact of Kamala Harris in the race thus far?
She really has turned the race on its head. And by turning on its head, it's completely changed the narrative. You've gone from a race that was primarily focused on the age and the ability of the current president of the United States to do the job, to a race in which Donald Trump is now the oldest nominee in history. You've gone from a race where there was a real lack of enthusiasm on the part of Democratic voters to one where the enthusiasm gap to shift the other direction. On the 16th of July, there was an NBC poll that asked party voters whether they were satisfied with their candidates. And on the Republican Party, not surprisingly, it was 71 to 35 in favor of Donald Trump. On the Democratic side, only 34% of party voters said they were satisfied with their candidate. And even then, in mid-July, we were at parity. Now, I think if you were to redo that poll, you'd probably see numbers upward of 90%. And the attention, once again, would focus back on the Republican side. Why is it that almost 30% of them are not satisfied with their candidate? And so many other areas, fundraising, organization, obviously the role of women, as your report just showed. It has fundamentally changed the nature of the race.
And the polling, just to drill down into that, I've seen some favourability numbers in the last little while out of Fox News showing that in those battleground states, the favourability for Kamala Harris has improved over the last week.
Look, vice president is probably the most thankless job in the United States. You're attacked all the time. You can't defend yourself because you're supposed to be all about the head of the ticket, all about the president. You get a lot of work, but you're not able to take credit for that work. And so the challenge right now for Kamala Harris is to reintroduce herself to the country who really haven't known too much about her, haven't paid a lot of attention to her since she ran for president herself back in 2020. And again, I think once that happens, and we've seen evidence of that over the last week, the matchup is quite different than it was just a week ago. Former prosecutor versus convicted felon, woman versus somebody who takes credit in overturning Roe versus Wade, and obviously now a vice presidential candidate who's kind of doubling down on some of those positions.
Now, in some of those swing states, what's your assessment? I know Arizona's one that you know well, a relative former Republican senator there in Jeff Flake. What's your read on some of those key states?
Well, that is where the election will be decided. Obviously, I think those considerations are likely weighing upon current Vice President Kamala Harris as she thinks about her running mate, because among the potential candidates for a running mate, for a vice presidential candidate for her, are Mark Kelly, the current senator out of Arizona, Josh Shapiro, a current governor in one of the other swing states, Pennsylvania. So that dynamic is going to be really important. I think it's a little bit too early to draw too much of a conclusion from polls. They have been, closely divided. I think they will continue to be closely divided because the United States remains a deeply divided nation. Having said that, however, there is no question that at least as of now, 1 week after the dramatic decision on the part of President Joe Biden to not contest, to step down from the race, things are looking very different than they were a week ago, and that would obviously stretch to the swing states themselves. We just don't have enough polling yet to be able to quantify that.
We heard Annalise Nielsen's report there on the cat lady's comments by JD Vance, and maybe a little buyer's remorse among some in the Republicans?
Look, I think the focus is less on the cat lady's block. There's not such a thing. It's more on the undecided, middle-of-the-road voters. Traditionally in campaigns, you throw out red meat for your supporters in the primaries, and then you tack to the middle to try to attract independent voters. So the comments that J.D. Vance has made and continues to make are really good for the most conservative, the most MAGA Republicans. And in fact, he was selected by President Trump, our former President Trump, I think under the belief that he had a lead and he was going to win and he could just double down. That's one thing he does very well. So he's doubling down on his positions on abortion, on women, and on red meat for the party. The challenge is whether or not that will expand the base, whether that will appeal to independent voters, including women who don't have children. But obviously, I think you've seen a pretty strong response from women across the board and men across the board who don't think that that is a fair representation of one's relative commitment to the country.
Gordon Flake, Perth, USAsia Centre Chief Executive. Appreciate your insights. Thanks.
My pleasure. Thank you.